Welcome back, welcome back. We are here yet again. Archive memories on location, filmed in front of a live studio audience.
Haha, laugh track inserted here.
Insert upbeat and charming theme song that people will remember for years to come.
Doodle-doo-doo-doo-doo.
Classic. All right. So to start us off, got to talk about, Netrunner in general before we get into any specific card discussions, of course.
Naturally.
I do believe that the Nisei tournament that I was telling you about was held yesterday.
Okay.
I don't know anything about the results or anything like that. I just know that our mutual acquaintance, Matt Dawkins, had posted some pictures that I believe were from said tournament.
Okay, well, listen here. You had a homework assignment to show up with just a deck of Netrunner cards, non-Nisei cards, and you let us down.
Turns out I actually forgot when it even was, because I thought it was later in the month.
Okay, well, you need to now apologize to our audience who is looking forward to a story about you being thrown from a game shop.
Yeah, sorry. I do not have any anecdotes about me being tossed out of Petrie's Family Games due to bringing an illegal Netrunner Nisei format deck.
Unbelievable.
But I also have another thing I wanted to bring up. This is just kind of a stupid thing, but me and my buddies will play the Lord of the Rings LCG, another card game by Fantasy Flight. Not as good as Netrunner, but I still thought it was decent, and we still play it occasionally to this day. We play it over Tabletop Simulator because we don't have enough of the fucking card pool for all of us to be able to run the shit that we would like to run.
Yeah, fair enough.
And also one of our buddies lives like 3.5 hours away, so
what a bitch.
Yeah, that guy. But anyway, I was just having a lot of fun because my other two buddies that we play with were my old Netrunner buddies, and I always host the games on Tabletop Simulator just because I have the best connection.
Mm-hmm.
And I was having a lot of fun that in Tabletop Simulator, even when you have like a custom module loaded, you can just like load in just like custom cards and shit, and like put your own images on there. So I was just randomly like spawning in cards, and I was just like spawning in like account siphon into like the middle of the table.
Sounds like the exact thing you need to defeat that Nazgul.
Yeah. So I was a little disappointed though, because there was also like a stamp tool, which was even funnier to use because the account siphon, it's like a card that people can in Tabletop Simulator pick up and interact with. So one of my buddies, he was just like, "What the fuck is this?" and just picked it up and deleted it. And I was like, "Oh damn, my 60 seconds of hard work."
So you just need to figure out how to make an account siphon stamp.
Right. So there's a stamp tool which other people can't interact with. Mm-hmm. It's not like an object that can be picked up. It's just stamped onto, whatever you stamp it onto, be it the table or a mat or whatever.
Right.
So I made a stamp of Net Police. And I stamped it onto my buddy's play area. And I was a little upset because somehow he just didn't notice it. Like I literally had to point it out to him before he was like, "Oh wait, what the fuck?" Yeah. So for like his whole turn, he was like playing, and there's just like Net Police just like sitting there on his play area.
Sweet prank, bro.
Yeah, I somehow did not notice it. So a little unfortunate, but anyway, all that to say that I would recommend slotting Net Police into your Mono Tactics Lord of the Rings deck.
Well, shall we get on to today's topics?
Yeah, which is cards.
Mm-hmm.
Still Shaper ones, programs at that.
Indeed.
Is this the last program? This might be the last Shaper program.
It's not quite.
Oh. Well, I'm going to let myself be unspoiled then, because I could not tell you what the next one is, so.
Okay. All right, well, I'll go ahead and start us off this week. So, next up we have NetShield. NetShield, as mentioned, is a Shaper program. It costs 2 to install and 1 memory. It has no subtypes. Its ability simply reads, for 1 credit, prevent the first net damage this turn. It is a 1 influence and has a strength of dash. Okay, so Aaron, clearly this card is intended to solve one problem. Why did that make it not worth running when things like Plascrete Carapace, which also solved one problem, were.
Well, I'd like to start off by giving you a little shout. I appreciate you making sure to include that it has strength of dash.
Thank you.
I think that we at Archive Memories pride ourselves in being thorough, so I am glad that you did not miss that this time.
Well, I'm just trying to hold myself to a higher standard.
Right. But anyway, I think the reason why is just because, simply put, being killed by meat damage is just a much more likely and was a much more common scenario than being killed or even extremely disrupted by net damage, and one net damage at that.
Yeah.
Now, in Net Shield's defense, I mean, I think spoilers. This isn't a very good card.
Yeah.
Sorry to be that guy. Spoilers. Net Shield never saw very much play. However, in its defense, I will say that this looked a lot more appealing when Potential Unleashed became a thing.
Yes. And I'll also I will agree with that and kind of echo it with Chronos Protocol's selective mind mapping. I think for both of those instances, when there were more of those things around, Net Shield became a little bit tempting for some people.
Yeah, once 1,000 Cuts really became a viable archetype, and for those who may not be initiated, I think we've touched on it a little bit in prior episodes. But 1,000 Cuts is rather than doing a whole lot of damage at once with the intention of killing the runner or flatlining the runner, because those who may not be initiated, if they take more damage than they have cards in their hand, they lose.
Yep.
Rather than doing net damage in chunks with the intention of completing that goal, rather the goal would just be more of a war of attrition and just kind of slowly killing the runner, so in a more metaphorical sense, by taking away their options and cards and things that they want from their deck, by doing slow, small, but very steady amounts of net damage over the course of the game.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Because it turns out you need cards to win the game. And so when you're constantly losing those cards and they're going in the bin and you draw more and then you lose some of those too, it's inconvenient.
Yes. And not every deck really can afford to run a level of recursion that makes it, kind of okay to play against. Like different kinds of decks are going to run different sorts of cards, and so not every deck is going to want to include copies of Levy AR Lab Access or Clone Chip or
Trope.
Thing or whatever.
Let's not forget about Trope.
Don't even remember what that does, but I believe that we'll get to it one day. But anyway, yes. So once that became more of an actual Jinteki archetype, because that didn't really become viable until Honor and Profit, kind of, I'll say.
Yeah.
It was like, it definitely kind of halfway existed with stuff like Focus Grid, but
sure, but Honor and Profit was the thing that made 1,000 Cuts viable. I mean, simple stuff like House of Knives, just the incredible ice that Jinteki got out of that. Komainu, Pop, others.
You could really just leave it at House of Knives.
Yeah, House of Knives is awesome. I love that, and it's beautiful.
Yes,
but this isn't. We're not discussing House of Knives.
Well, I think House of Knives is worth bringing up because Net Shield prevents the first net damage this turn, so you could trigger it, against House of Knives if they want to, spend the counter during a run, and you could also do it on the corpse turn. It's flexible in when it can kind of prevent that damage, I guess, as so long as it's the first instance.
Right, yeah. It protects you from at least one early MP, stuff like that as well.
Right, excuse me. So, now as far as why this never really saw a lot of play, I think this really had one big competitor. Okay, I guess, what's the best way to put this? This card, by the time there was an archetype that it was useful against, had what I think most people saw as a better alternative to it.
Yes.
because we got feedback filter in creation and control, I believe, which was the big box that came out before honor and profit. So by the time the archetype that this card was effective against came out or was able to be played, there was a better card for it by that point.
Yeah, and it's interesting you call feedback filter better. I agree with you, but on the basic math of it, feedback filter is 3 credits to prevent 1 net damage, whereas this is 1. Now, sure, this only, you can do it once per turn, but I think most people also preferred running feedback filter, and I just find that interesting.
Yeah, I think it's one of those where just the numbers can be a little misleading, right? Because you're absolutely correct. At face value, you look at it and it's like, okay, I can spend 1 to prevent, a damage theoretically, right? Or I can spend 3. Well, obviously, spending 1 is better. But feedback filter was just a lot more flexible. It was a hardware, so it didn't take up an MU spot, which this does. And, of course, feedback filter not vulnerable to program trashing. This is. And then additionally, feedback filter could prevent any amount of net damage. It wasn't just the first per turn.
Right, yeah.
And the reason why that cost doesn't really matter so much is because the big thing with feedback filter is you weren't going to generally use it to prevent all the net damage. You were just going to use it to prevent the 1 net damage that would kill you.
Yes.
Or if you're really just holding on to, some bangers in hand and you don't want a chance that they're going to get sniped, then you may, drain yourself or, spend that, or I guess eat that big tax to protect what you have. But it gave you that flexibility where this is always just going to prevent 1 and it's just going to be the first.
Yep.
So it's cheap, yes, but I think that the old adage, you get what you pay for, is pretty applicable here.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
So how do you play with and against this card? This is sort of one of those cards where may not be a lot of discussion around that. Just kind of
sure. Like the only point that I would raise about playing with Net Shield is it takes a memory.
Yes,
and that's honestly one of the most annoying parts about it. Is it's the most difficult card type to play around as a runner. You need to have the memory to run this along with whatever else you're running. Is it do you have Magnum Opus? Are you running core set stuff, and so you've also got like battering ram as your barrier breaker? I mean, memory problems are a real thing. Even later on, are you running data suckers in concert with like Anarch fixed breakers? Because memory is a problem. If you're counting on this to save your life, have the memory to use it.
Yeah, for sure. As we talked about kind of in the last episode specifically, I mean, a lot of times memory is kind of can be at a premium,
Yes.
So it's just a little unwieldy to try to fit this around a lot of rigs.
Yeah.
Also, a point I'll make about playing with it, should you so choose to, because say that you are running against like a PU or Chronos protocol, right? Because there's Chronos projects, the agenda, right?
Yes.
Okay. So say you're running against 1,000 cuts, we'll just call it that, heavy meta in your area, and you're going to make the decision to slot the net shield rather than the feedback filter. You just got to keep in mind, right? It's the first net damage this turn, so you're really only going to be safe for that first instance that you put yourself out there, so to speak.
Yep.
So not going to protect you on multiple runs. If they're sitting on House of Knives with multiple counters, you only make 1 run if you want to keep what's in your hand. And so on and so forth.
Yeah.
And then against this, it's just the inverse of that logic, right? Just keep in mind that your first attempt at being a dickhead is going to be thwarted.
Yeah. Save the dickhead energy for when it matters.
Yes. Interesting kind of thought I just had, right?
Hit me.
So as I kind of mentioned, people tend to run feedback filter due to it's more flexible, but when they run feedback filter, they usually just use it to protect against the net damage, that would kill them, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, like, usually if you're going to take a bunch of net damage, right, you're not going to prevent all 3 of it, you're just going to prevent 1,
Yes.
If it would cause you to die. Would this be a better card if it had like a second ability that was like or maybe even said like prevent the first or last net damage this turn, or like a second ability that said like prevent the last net damage this turn?
But how do you know it's the last net damage this turn?
Oh, yeah, I guess that's fair. Maybe the last instance of I guess there's really no way you could word that to make it fill that space that I guess feedback filter does.
Mm-hmm. You could make it just a once per turn in general.
Yeah, I think that'd be better. Yeah, I think that's the wording that you need is just prevent one net damage. Use this ability only once per turn.
Yeah,
I don't think that would make it a whole lot better, but it would make it like pretty decently better.
I would agree. Yes, that would be an improvement.
Did this card affect the meta?
No. I mean, briefly, people kind of considered running it, or when and if there was a lot of 1,000 cuts around, and that was about it.
Yeah, I think when PU was at its peak, which to be fair, like PU like sucked pretty hard to play against, so I think that's when people definitely started looking at this and feedback filter as being like viable options. But I think later on we kind of got like better versions almost of Net Shield. Didn't we get some resources that prevented net damage in sort of a similar way?
I'm forgetting them at the moment, but I believe yes.
I want to say it was like biometric spoofing or something.
Yeah, I was playing the wrong faction for like this kind of stuff most of the time. I mean, when PU was making its round, I was more like, okay, it's time for Solset Slums in all of my decks, but
sure. Yeah, there was a card called Biometric Spoofing that was just a neutral resource that you could just trash to prevent 2 damage. Granted, that's only once, so yeah, it probably doesn't occupy the same space. Anyway, yeah, its only real place in the meta, I would say, is strictly that it was an option as a tech against potential Unleashed, should you want to go that route.
Yeah, more or less. All right, go ahead.
And I was going to say, and so we talk about flavor.
Right. I am not a fan of the art on this card.
It's a little weird, isn't it?
It's definitely a little weird. Why is this man in a suit? Why is he glowing? What's the deal?
He's in the net shield.
Yeah, okay.
He is being shielded from the net? By the net?
Yeah, I mean, I get what they're trying to go for. I'm just not in love with the implementation here.
You want to read the flavor text?
Sure. All right. Sucks energy like a Martian Terabot, but it keeps you focused.
Wow, how sci-fi. What's a Martian Terabot?
Indeed. Nobody knows. It's probably a prostitute.
I don't get what the flavor seems kind of inconsistent with the card itself, because like it takes up an MU, but it's only 1 credit.
Yeah, so it's not that expensive. But you have to have it in memory. I don't know, man.
Yeah, I don't hate the art. I'm just kind of neutral on it. I think I guess I can't really think of how I would better illustrate what a net shield is supposed to be and do. But I feel like it'd be different than this.
Yeah.
I'm going to go with cool neutral on the flavor here.
Yeah, the function to flavor isn't bad. The flavor text I'm not that fond of. The art I'm not that fond of.
Yeah, I guess I can't necessarily say that I'm, I guess not fond of is a decent way to put it. I'm just neutral. I don't hate anything. Nothing's offensive, but it's not really cool either.
Yeah. I didn't scroll past this card in my binder and it's like, ooh, that looks cool. I want to put it in.
Yeah, no. I don't think I've ever slotted this. Yeah, I don't think I have ever even tried to put this in a deck.
But what about in program hell?
Oh, you're right. Every time with the program hell.
For those out there who may not be aware, program hell is just Professor with every program ever printed.
Yes. Best deck ever made. really the best game of Netrunner you could possibly play is Program Hell versus Titan 419 or whatever that was.
Yeah, pretty much.
All right. What are we rating NetShield?
1 star, because it kind of served a function, sort of, at times, but I don't like it.
Yeah, I will have to be in agreement in that I will give it a 1 star as well, because there was at least at one point in the game a reason to consider it.
Yeah. So it's not total meat space garbage, but
no, just almost.
Yeah.
All right, well that's all I got to say about NetShield.
Yep.
Oh, how could I forget? All right, well I will take away the next one here. We have a legend of Netrunner here, Pipeline, which is a program with the subtypes Icebreaker, Killer. It is 3 to install, takes up 1 MU, has a base strength of 1, and it reads 1 credit to break sentry subroutine, and 2 credits for a +1 strength for the remainder of this run. And it is coming in at a single influence out of the Shaper faction.
Mm-hmm.
So, Isaac, why is Pipeline just bad?
2 reasons, and they're very simple. Number one base strength. 1 base strength is bad. It's really bad. Really, really bad. Like the second worst base strength, you might say.
Very not good.
Yeah, paired with that is 2 credits for +1 strength. So you've got a really crappy base strength that you need to pump all the time, and you need to pay 2 each time. Now, yes, I can already hear some idiot out there saying, but it's +1 strength for the remainder of this run. But how often does that come into play? Not often enough for me to want to run Pipeline, that's for sure. Very, very commonly, like for most of the duration of the average Netrunner game, I would say average ice on a server you're running is like 2.
Yeah.
So even if they were both sentries, you're coming out even with Pipeline, assuming you have to pump for both of them and the same amount. That's everything in your favor, and you're coming out even. So you basically need 3 sentries in order for Pipeline to maybe be making use of its ability. And it's like, no, you stink, please go.
Yeah. The math just is not favorable for Pipeline. And that's the thing about icebreakers, is that it's really all about the math.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you're not getting into servers for a semi-decent amount of money, then you're just not going to have a good time.
Yeah.
As basically a core philosophy of the game.
Yes.
I don't really know that there's much more to say about Pipeline. It's really not good.
Yeah. In most ways, it's basically just, all right, this is a sentry breaker that sucks.
Yeah. That's pretty much the long and short of Pipeline. You can break sentries, but for $1 billion.
Yeah. Super not worth running. And I guess they were trying to do this thing with Shapers early on, where it was just like, oh, Shaper breakers retain their strength for the entire run. And for some things like Gordian Blade, who has good math, it's like, sure, whatever. I will occasionally get benefit out of this alongside it being a good breaker. Battering Ram was somewhere kind of in between. It was like, this kind of sucks because of the 2 credits to break 2 barrier subroutines, but it's not that bad. And then Pipeline is the worst of the lot, where it's 2 for 1 strength. Is ugh.
Yeah, it's like a reverse sort of rock, paper, scissors with the factions that they went with, where it's like Shapers are going to have bad sentry breakers, Anarch's going to have bad Nothing.
No,
Apparently.
Anarch just had good breakers.
Yeah, and then Criminal doesn't even get a decoder.
Yep, no decoder at all. But Criminal did have good sentry breakers.
Yes. And it did seem like they were trying to go for a theme where each faction had their strong breaker, but then they just did it wrong because all of Anarch's breakers in the core set were just good.
Yeah, it didn't really quite work out the way they intended it, I think.
Yeah, because here's my question. Getting a little bit off the tangent of pipeline here, but there's not much more to say about it, so got to pad the discussion somehow. So clearly, I feel like there was purposeful philosophy in that each faction was supposed to have breakers they were bad at.
Yeah.
What do you think in the core set the designers meant to be Anarch's bad breaker?
None of them. None of them make sense as a bad breaker. It just felt like they were trying to limit them with Yogg and Mimic to say, oh, high strength stuff is the problem, where they were trying to make good breakers with flaws. It doesn't really feel like they tried to give Anarch a bad breaker.
Yes, that's fair. Just seems so weird that they would give, Shaper and Criminal such, blatantly bad breakers.
Yeah.
And then just be like, Anarch can just have good ones.
I think what it means is that Lucas is an Anarch at heart. I want to believe that.
Yeah, that makes sense. Anyway, as I've said with, I think I made the same remark about Aurora, but the only purpose that I've ever found for Pipeline is when I make Netrunner draft cubes. The base copy of a killer that everyone gets is Pipeline.
Yeah, just here's your scraps, peasants. Better draft something better if you want it.
Yep. Here is a card that allows you to break sentries. That's the only criteria it needs to fill. All right, this card does not warrant any further discussions surrounding playing with, against, or a place in the meta because it sucks. Nobody ever used it, nobody ever played with it or against it, and it's not worth talking about.
Yep, agreed. How do you like the art?
I don't know.
I like the colors, but
yeah, it's weird because it's got an eye-catching sort of color scheme, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
And there is some seemingly interesting stuff going on. There's a pipe, and the pipe's shooting a laser. That's the end of the pipeline. Beginning.
Yeah, sure.
But it's pretty abstract. I'll say that.
It's pretty abstract, which I commonly don't mind for my breakers. This is one of those ones where I would like to see the full art in its context, because some of those you really get a much better sense of it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't mind it. I think it's good looking. Again, abstract, but pretty.
I like purple. Purple's one of my favorite colors, and I feel like purple got a little bit underutilized in some of the breaker art, in my opinion.
I like how this is what we're reduced to talking about this card is I like purple.
Listen, this is what Pipeline has for us. This is what Pipeline brought to the table. Okay, it brought the color purple.
Yeah, fair enough.
All right, let's rate it.
0 stars.
You read my mind.
This is meat space garbage. It's just very bad. And it's not even interesting bad, they were going somewhere cool with it. This just sucks.
Yeah, it's not even fun bad. It's not even not even the funny kind of bad, Worm kind of is.
Right. Yeah. Worm we can have a good laugh over. Pipeline is just it's that one kid in your 4th grade class and you see him eating the paint off of the wall and you don't really find amusement in it anymore. It's just this is sad. Can we do something about this?
Yeah, no, it's this fucking guy again. Pipeline again, every fucking time with Pipeline. Yeah, it's bad, not in an amusing way. So I don't think that it deserves any more of a spotlight than we've already given it out of being compelled to, out of
Indeed.
obligation.
Okay, well, that's it for the Shaper programs.
What a lot that was.
Yeah, indeed. Okay, so
I think I might have been wrong. I think maybe Shaper has the worst cards in the core set.
It's got some bad ones for sure, but we've got a better one coming up for you, Shaper fans. All right. So next up we have Aesop's Pawn Shop. It is a Shaper resource. It has the subtypes location and connection. It is 1 credit to install. It is unique, so you can only have one of these in play. It reads, when your turn begins, you may trash another of your installed cards to gain 3 credits. And it is 2 influence. Okay. Aaron, tell me why Lucas made a mistake making this a Shaper card and not an Anarch card.
I'm going to argue that he did not make a mistake, and that really he probably didn't think about it, but ultimately it should not be an Anarch card, because Anarchs should have to pay 2 influence for copies of this.
All right, defend your position.
I don't know, just with as we've already complained in the early episodes to great lengths, or at least I have. I mean, you were probably fine with it. But I have already complained at great lengths about noise shop decks.
Sure.
And like and this was a pretty big component of the noise shop deck, really giving it extremely consistent and good and steady, I guess, extremely consistent and steady econ that they can turn all of their viruses and yada yada into.
All right, I agree with you, but that's not the problem with that deck. That deck's problem was not that their economy was too good. The problem with that deck was that you would instant speed install a bunch of viruses and then access a bunch of cards from archives as a result of that.
Well, right, but all I'm really
doesn't
saying
have anything
is,
directly to do with that.
Sure, I guess really all I'm saying is I'm glad that deck didn't have an additional 4 to 6 influence to work with.
Well, I'm going to go ahead and defend my question then, because Shapers basically did not run this card.
Yeah.
Very rarely. Aesop's Pawn Shop existed pretty much entirely in Anarchs, mostly in Noise, for selling off viruses and other cards. You could get cheeky interactions with it as well if you sell a Daily Casts right as it finishes, selling an Armitage Code Busting that's got 2 or 4 credits left on it. There's cheeky things you can do with it like that, and Anarchs, who treat a lot of their rig as disposable like Noise, really got along very well with Aesop's Pawn Shop, and it was a cool interaction, and it worked well, and Wildside feeds well into this as well, since you've got Wildside drawing you cards constantly but costing you clicks, and Aesop allowing you to get rid of those cards without spending clicks.
Yeah, I will say that, both kind of thematically and functionally, it seems to make more sense out of Anarch. I will say as well, I do believe that one day you will silence your phone before we start recording. But I don't know. It's one of those cards where I feel like this isn't even the only one. There's a lot of cards that make more sense in other factions, but I think were legitimately placed in other ones just so that there'd be an influence tax for the, faction that really wants them.
Yeah.
And I legitimately believe this was probably the case with Aesop. They probably saw this and were like, yeah, this would probably be too strong for Anarchs to get for free.
Yeah, I can understand that. It disappoints me, but I understand it.
Because, you're right. Shapers didn't play this. God, Criminals didn't play this, I don't think.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. This is an Anarch card in green.
Yeah. But I think that it was done with purpose. And purpose, I think, that made sense. Like I said, I think a lot of those decks, how much more annoying would a lot of those Anarch decks be if they just, had a extra influence to work with,
Sure. To kind of lead us into the how do you play with this discussion that we kind of discussed it a little bit, is I will give a shout out to our good friend Ordinu, who did play this card in Shaper in Exile, where he would kind of do a similar thing to noise builds, where he would install cheap programs, sell them to Aesop, install them from his discard, and use it all as a self-contained and perpetuating draw engine, which is cool, and fair enough to him for that. But it was not popular, we'll say that.
Yeah, it wasn't popular. Arguably not very good.
I mean, I wasn't going to say it. I was going to let you do it, but yes.
Right. Which is what I'm here for, is to say that things are not good.
Yeah, thank you.
But can't say that about Aesops. I mean, it's a good card. It just functions most out of Anarch, where you're going to have a lot of shit that you can sell and not feel bad about.
Indeed.
I feel like there's another archetype that made good use out of Aesop that wasn't out of Anarch, and I'm having trouble thinking of what it was.
Think.
I feel like there's like another type of deck that ran cards with like expendable stealth decks. Did stealth decks run this? No, probably not.
No. Geist didn't run it. He was using trash abilities.
Yeah, so
I'm not thinking of anything else really.
Yeah, I don't know. If anybody listening can remember what deck used Aesop's Pawn Shop that wasn't Anarch, let us know. Well, was it Anarch or Exile?
Leave it in the comments below, or etc., etc.
Yep. Playing against it really is just if you can get a tag on the runner, then you trash it and probably feel okay about that.
Yeah, basically.
Because otherwise it's not really an ability that you're going to be able to interact with or affect at all.
No. It's basically out of your reach. It's doing its own thing. Though I will say, when the runner is relying on this card, if you can get rid of it, it is a huge boon to you to do so.
Yes. This is probably a pretty prime target if the runner lets themselves remain tagged at the end of their turn.
Absolutely. Like this is prime Elizabeth Mills target if you happen to be there.
Good old Elizabeth Mills. How did this card affect the meta?
I mean, in a lot of ways, it enabled the Noise Shop deck we talked about, but that was about the extent of it. It's a consistent economy engine that doesn't require clicks aside from the clicks that you're spending to install the things you're trashing. But generally speaking, when you're doing that with Aesop, those are non-economy cards that you're installing that get turned back into kind of economy cards. Or turns economy cards into better cards, as mentioned with like daily casts or Cash, the criminal virus that was also really an Anarch card.
Yes. Another card that they just decided to influence tax Anarch with.
Basically.
But yeah, I think this was just always a very appealing option for for any Anarch deck that was going to be trying to do a virusy thing.
Yep.
Oh wait, I'm reading Netrunner DB reviews on Aesop's Pawn Shop, and I think what I was thinking of was Haley Kaplan decks. I think tended to run Aesop.
Could be. I never really played much Haley Kaplan, so
because she installed a lot of shit with her ability, and then,
right, yeah.
So I believe that's what I was thinking of.
Yeah, makes sense.
Anyway.
Okay, flavor text?
Yeah. Not flavor text specifically.
But flavor that too.
Aesop, we're only going to talk about the flavor text. We're not even going to bother with anything else.
All right, well, I'm going to read the flavor text since we're already there. You didn't mention Aesop's arm unless you wanted an earful. Sometimes he talked about it in such a way that you wondered why he didn't laser his other arm off as well.
That flavor text was always interesting to me because isn't the idea that we're like far enough in the future that people just do that?
I'm sure someone would, and maybe Aesop is one of them.
You're right. I just always thought that was a weird statement to make. Like, oh man, like you often wondered, oh, why don't you just cut your other arm off and replace it with a robot arm? But it's like,
I mean,
why
if your
would that?
robot arm can like punch a hole through a wall, then it's kind of understandable.
Sure, yeah. Just it seems like people would be doing that all the time anyway in that cyberpunk future. So why even bother? I guess I don't know, it just seems like a statement that you would make now, right? If somebody was talking like about like their robot arm that they love, because maybe they lost an arm. Because I think the implication, especially like with his dog tags and shit, is that he lost it in some sort of like military service.
Yeah, kind of makes sense. He lost it in the Corp Wars or whatever.
Yeah, he lost in the Great Amazon Walmart War.
Yeah.
And so, right, but he's talking about it in a way that it's like, okay, well, that's not really a debilitation. Why don't you just lop your other arm off? But then it's the future, and people are like Gabriel Santiago apparently are just doing that anyway. So
yeah, maybe I'm weird. Like I kind of get it, but I want to keep my arms attached.
That's because you're weak. That's because you're meat space garbage. The art is pretty good on this, though. I'll say I always kind of like this.
Yes, I would agree with that. And the promo art they did for it as well, I think was even better. Like I like the base art, and the other art was awesome, and I loved those.
Yeah, I found the full version of the promo art, and I had that as my phone wallpaper.
Oh yeah, right
lock
on.
screen wallpaper for a long time.
And marriage of function and flavor, I think, is awesome. It's just you cart whatever into Aesop, and he will buy it from you.
Which is always interesting.
Right, it's hilarious, right? It's like here's this this monolith console that costs the GDP of a mid-sized European nation. Best I can do is 3 credits. Or here's this empty virus that does absolutely nothing at all. 3 credits.
Here's this person.
Right. Here's my friend Katie Jones. What will you give me for Katie Jones? 3 credits.
Yeah, it's just the implications are pretty hilarious. The fact that this any card you can sell. Oh no, I thought of it. It just came to me because I was going to make a joke about Apex. Apex played Aesops because you sell your blank cards for money.
Except he did not.
Did he not? I thought I could have sworn
you can only install virtual resources.
Ah, well, shit. Never mind that. I'm on something though. I'm on what?
It would have been good if he could do it.
I'm thinking maybe it was a deck that ran Harbinger and then sold.
Could be. Yeah.
I'm on the trail. One day, like 3 episodes from now, I'll finally think of what the deck was.
Yeah, you can tell us about it in the morning news section.
Yep. But anyway, yeah, pretty hilarious function flavor sort of stuff going on there. What are we rating Aesop?
Aesop is 5 stars. This card rules. I love it. It's good. It's interesting. And it's flavorful. It's all of the things I like. 5 stars.
That feels a little out of left field for me, coming from you, because I did not really get that inclination from our little discussion about it. That you were just like, that you were fucking ride or die for Aesop in his pawn shop.
I am 100% ride or die for Aesop. Every time I go in, I ask about his arm.
That's fair, and you get an earful. So this might be a controversial rating, but I'm going to give it a 3.
You're going to give my man a 3. This is because he only paid 3 credits for your toolbox, isn't it?
Yeah, I'm giving best I can do is a 3, much like Aesop himself. So here's my argument for why I'm just giving it a 3. I never played it being a Shaper player. There's not really very much of a reason to run this outside of kind of, as we discussed, like Anarch and some, weird other niche decks.
Nerd.
And for as cool as it is, it just never seemed all that, like, particularly interesting to me. Like, it just doesn't have an effect that makes me go, oh, wow, that's rad.
I don't know. I always felt nice putting it into decks, and it felt great to draw, and it felt great to use it in cheeky ways.
I mean, I've played with it, because of course, building all
Mhm.
manner of different decks for testing
Sure.
purposes. When I would play with decks that ran ESOPs, it always did feel nice because you just get money for free. I mean, pretty much,
Mhm.
right? I mean, that's nice. It's an
Basically,
infinite daily casts.
you sell him your garbage.
Yes, so it feels very nice to play with. I will admit that. But I don't know. It's just never called out to me in a flavor way. I've never found it a particularly interesting card. Um, there was no really reason to put it into any of the decks I ran because I played Shaper. So funny that hey, this Shaper card. There's really no reason to use it in Shaper. And so whatever. I don't know. It's always just been sort of underwhelming to me. So I give it a 3. And that's all I have to say about that.
And here I thought we were friends.
You thought wrong.
Top 5 anime betrayals right here on this podcast.
Right? Not even top 10, it's top 5. Alright, we're moving along. So, I believe I have reigns over Sacrificial Construct, which is a 0 to play resource with the remote subtype. I'll be honest with you, I didn't realize that remote was a subtype. Do any other cards have the remote subtype?
I don't recall.
I have to do some Netrunner DB searching. But anyway, it reads, trash, prevent an installed program or an installed piece of hardware from being trashed. And it is coming in at 1 influence, again, out of the Shaper faction. So, Isaac, why, despite this having a pretty appealing effect, and costing 0 credits to install, and also being only 1 influence, did this not see very much love?
It's kind of weird, right? The reality of it, I think, is that first, hardware is not trashed often. It's just hardware is a difficult subtype for the corp to get their dirty little paws onto, so that's difficult. So you don't get a lot of use out of that. Now, programs are another matter. There are plenty of things that trash programs. However, here's the deal. Most of the ways that you can prevent programs from being trashed is called having a killer installed to break sentries. And that also gets you past sentries. Whereas Sacrificial Construct, each copy prevents one program from being trashed one time, and it doesn't do anything else. What if you're running up against somebody who's not trashing any programs? It kind of falls into a similar problem as NetShield did, where you're solving a problem, sure, but is it a problem you're always going to have? You don't have total control over what corp decks you're going to be going up against.
Yes. Additionally, kind of just piggybacking on that thought as well, is there's also, I think, a very valid strategy that you can employ. So one is, of course, like you mentioned, having a killer installed. Another is just not being dumb. Because many of the circumstances that arise in which your programs or hardware are trashed is from you not playing intelligently. It's from you doing dumb things, like not having a killer installed and running into a roto turret. Or just, pretty much every circumstance that the corp has where they're able to trash one of your programs or hardware comes directly from you doing something stupid. And so, rather than slot a card that gives you leeway on being stupid, you could just not be stupid. That costs 0 deck slots.
It's true. You're not wrong. And being that this is a resource, it's not really very tutorable. So if you're going to run it, you need multiple copies. It's
right.
Yeah. Don't be dumb. Don't be dumb is what Sacrificial Constructs should say. Yes. Don't be dumb instead of putting me in your deck.
Additionally, a lot of before some FAQs came out and some rules clarifications, which there has been many of over Netrunner's lifespan, is that one of the main uses that people try to use Sacrificial Construct for is being able to get the benefit of another program's trash ability, but not trashing it, instead trashing Sacrificial Construct.
Sure.
But you can't do that. Because in Netrunner, if you don't do the thing or trash the thing, or something stops that from happening, then you are not considered to have paid that cost, and so you cannot reap whatever the benefit is.
Yeah, okay.
And that's, I think, one of the big downfalls of Sacrificial Construct, is that there is kind of the opportunity that this may have, right, where you could use it to extend the life or, double the usefulness or whatever of a program that you trash and get a benefit from, but you can't do that.
Yeah.
Now, there are some instances where you may be able to use it where, it's not a trash cost that you're paying, with the little trash can icon, that is here on Sacrificial Construct itself. So there's instances where you could use it to keep something on the table that maybe gets trashed at the end of a turn, or a card says to trash something at the end of a turn, another trash trigger that isn't paying the trash ability. But even those, I feel like, are pretty few and far between, and I can't even really name one right now.
Yeah, though I will say for this deck, or for this card, it was, I think, also used in the same sort of Haley Kaplan decks that we were talking about before, that are installing lots of things. It was like a considered like a secondary install or a primary install that you piggyback off of, that adds an additional safety net.
Yeah, that's fair. And then, when you're getting this for 0 clicks and 0 credits, it is definitely prime for our buddy Aesop. Because even if you can't or don't make use of it, it's still 3 credits.
Yeah.
So, very kind of, again, niche use, but a use nonetheless.
Indeed.
I will say that I think I vaguely considered this in London Library, my London Library Fem deck. I want to say that you could prevent it from getting trashed with Sacrificial Construct. I believe the wording on London Library allowed that to be a thing.
Sure, but even then, it's basically just storing a click.
You're right, but yeah. I obviously didn't put it in the deck, but
yeah,
I briefly considered
it. Yeah.
So.
And we have that card already. What is it, like Power Nap or something?
No, Power Nap's the one where you get a bunch of money for double events in your...
Oh, no, you're right. I forget the name of the card, but it's like you install it and then you spend a click to gain 2 clicks.
Oh, yeah, All-Nighter.
That's the one.
We'll get to that bad boy. But yeah, I don't know that there's really much more to be said about Sacrificial Construct.
Not a bunch, really.
It's just... It doesn't even also feel like a card that needs to even be in the core set, because some of these core set cards, as we've discussed in the past, are worth it just for the sake of having an effect and being able to at least teach you how that effect works, and yada yada. But I don't even know that this is really good as far as just a teaching sort of card,
Yeah, it does kind of serve a function in that regard, I suppose, and it is a safety net if you are a newer player and you feel like, oh, but running is scary, I want to protect my stuff.
Like a trap almost, which is sort of weird.
Yeah, kind of.
It almost seems like disingenuous that this card would be in the core set. It's like they're like, you're like being tricked into running this card when you're a new player,
Yeah, kind of. But if the core set is the only thing out there, or the only thing that you have, it's maybe a fair bet that you are newer, and then that's the one time that it actually is kind of useful.
And then you get a lecture from the sweaty guy at the game store about why you shouldn't be running sacrificial construct, and you should just be running smarter.
Construct is the crutch, and if you're using it, really you're just admitting that you're playing suboptimally.
Yes, that guy. All right, flavor?
It's not bad. I kind of like the art. It's just like a little box that is between you and the internet, and it's designed to explode when you would explode instead, or your rig would explode. It's kind of funny.
Yeah, when you described it that way, that made me chuckle. It's like my protective internet cube.
Right. It's like a paperweight that you just keep on your table that explodes at random times, and it's like, oh, all right, well, that was almost my rig. Neat.
I like to imagine a world where instead of antivirus programs, we just got these little cubes that you hooked up between your computer and your modem, and like you would just be like browsing some shady porn site, and then like it would just explode on your desk, and you'd be like, "Ooh, that was a close one."
So, man, I gotta go into town tomorrow and pick up some more internet cubes.
You're downloading Linkin Park underscore in the end underscore .exe from LimeWire, and it just explodes.
Yes, exactly that.
Anyway, the flavor text. I'm going to take this one because you actually read the last two because you're a bitch.
Yeah,
this is the life expectancy of a jacked construct is about that of a mayfly. In other words, short.
Yeah.
So what is a jacked construct?
Presumably, it is one of these boxes that you plug into the cyberspace.
Maybe. Okay, wait. I think I might be connecting some threads here from like a flavor to function perspective with this. So it's a sacrificial construct, right?
Mm-hmm.
So obviously it is a construct or a piece of hardware that you don't care about. I guess it's a resource. It's not hardware. Why is this a resource?
It's a good question. I don't know.
I never even thought about that. That doesn't make any sense. Anyway, so you have this piece of resource that obviously you don't care about and you're willing to quite literally sacrifice for another thing. So is the flavor implication that, I mean, this is just something that was stolen, it's a jacked construct, right? So maybe the flavor text is implying that, hey, if one of your things gets stolen, if it's not particularly useful, you're probably not going to get it back because, they're probably just going to explode it.
I hadn't thought about it in those terms. I more just thought of jacked as in jacked in.
I guess maybe, but like jacked in, like that is a term. I mean, a jacked construct. Either it's maybe really strong and swole, or it was stolen. That's the only thing I can think of with the word.
That boy doesn't look that swole. It looks like he skips leg day.
Yeah, it doesn't look buff by any means. So I don't know. What do we rate it though?
2 stars.
Interesting. 2 stars? I feel like you're going to need to defend yourself on this one.
Okay. Basically, mostly for flavor concerns, and because I think it serves a function for newer players. Something that I've seen with newer players who are playing as runners is that they get a little bit gun shy because they look at all the face down ice and they don't understand like how ice suites are constructed or what is likely to be where or what the risks are associated. And I think for those players, having something like Sacrificial Construct around is useful. So although we mostly spent this time talking about how it's fairly useless and just get good, I think it provides a useful function for those who are not yet good.
Yes, I can see that. So, you have swayed me a little bit. So I am just going to give it a 1. I was going to give it a 0. Because I do think that this card is actually pretty terrible.
It's pretty bad. But it was also in a World's winning deck, so...
Was it really?
Yeah, 100%. One of those Haley decks won in, 2017, I want to say.
And it was running Sacrificial Construct?
Yeah.
Alright, well, damn. Maybe we just suck.
Maybe.
'Cause I think it probably only was just literally by virtue of the fact that it was like an in faction 0 to play card, probably, right? That you could sell with ESOP.
Perhaps.
Alright, well, whatever. Fuck me, I guess. Alright, we wanna squeeze one more on this episode?
Sure. Next up, we are now into the neutral cards. We have Infiltration. Infiltration is a neutral event. It has no subtypes. It costs 0 to play, and it reads: gain 2 credits or expose 1 card. And like most neutral cards, it is no influence.
Nice. I will say, honestly, I'm excited that we're into the neutral cards here because
I know it feels like we're going places.
I know it feels like we were never going to get here.
Yeah. Okay, so Aaron, why is expose just really bad and nobody cares?
We kind of already talked about this in
a bit.
Some of our criminal discussions, right? Because there was some exposing shit going on with things like, isn't there something that exposes in criminal? I don't even remember.
Yes, Lemuria Codecracker.
Yes, that's right. A card that I forget even exists in the core set.
Yeah, for good reason.
This is better than that, though.
It is, because you can use this to gain 2 credits.
I will say that I almost slotted this into my Power Glove super event deck.
Just because you wanted more events.
Well, being an event, right, boosts its usefulness quite a bit.
Mm-hmm.
Because here's the thing, right? Playing this to expose a card just for a click, right, doesn't seem awesome. But being able to just expose a card for free after you play a sure gamble, not so bad, right?
Yeah, sure. Definitely less bad.
Yes.
That's kind of what Wild Card. Oh, Deuce is Wild. That's
Deuce
the
is
one
Wild.
I'm thinking. Yeah, Deuce is Wild. Like, one of its abilities that you can trigger is expose a card and then make a run, or expose a piece of ice and make a run.
Yes. Now I did run 3x Deuce is Wild.
Well, it's because it was good and this wasn't.
Yeah. But I almost ran it like in addition. And there's been times in the meta where I have been very tempted to just throw a one-off of this card into decks. Because while Expose is not great, because kind of as we've discussed in the past, a lot of the information that you're going to gain from Expose, you can just gain sort of similarly to our arguments about Sacrificial Construct, was that a lot of the information that you would gain from exposing a card, you would gain just by like playing well and seeing cards in other places, or making educated decisions about what was installed or what have you.
Yep.
But there's always going to be those times in the game where a card gets installed and you literally just don't know if it's going to be worth your time, and it's just a fact of the matter.
Niche. It's niche, but that moment happens.
Right, and it happens to everybody. Doesn't happen maybe every game, but I would say it probably happens maybe every other game where the corp's going to install a card in a server, and you're going to have to make that decision of, do I just ignore that or do I run on it? And it happened to me regularly enough that I thought, like, maybe one infiltration would be helpful. And then worst case scenario, it's a click for 2 credits. But at the same time, that's just not enough. Yeah.
This card got power crept hard.
Yes. You just gave one example, but there's a myriad of other cards that are worth running over this one.
Right. Take, like, Dirty Laundry, which didn't come out that long after this. That was Creation and Control, if I remember right.
Yes.
Is 3 credits and a run, basically. The run has to be successful and you have to pay 2 credits up front, but it's 3 credits and making a run, as opposed to this, which is more often than not just 2 credits and no run.
Would this be too strong if it was gain 2 credits and expose 1 card?
No. It would not be. It would
Okay.
still have been power crept.
Gotcha. I was going to say, would it be worth playing, I guess, is the next question.
Probably not. Maybe early on.
That's fair.
Sometimes, but mostly no.
But yeah, I guess this is just a classic example of deck slots are at a premium. Every card that you put in your deck, really has to do something pretty damn good. We'll just say that, right?
Yeah, this feels kind of like filler. And that seems kind of harsh to say, but it does feel like filler to me.
It seems, though, I will say that it almost seems like a sort of necessary card out of the core set.
Perhaps.
In that Expose, obviously, is a mechanic. I think Expose is a mechanic that needs to exist. I don't think that exposing cards should not exist, at least. And this card does that. It's neutral. You can put it in any deck. And I do at least appreciate that they gave it the, gain 2 credits portion.
Mm-hmm.
Because I could absolutely see a world where they just printed a neutral event that exposed 1 card. And I'm glad we don't live in that world, at least.
Yeah. Yeah, fair.
But ultimately, it's still it just doesn't give you enough for that deck slot.
Mm-hmm. It's kind of something we talked about with Magnum Opus, is that what Opus does phenomenally is the amount of economy it brings per deck slot. And this is the exact opposite end of the spectrum.
Yes. For 1 click, 1 time, you're going to gain 2 credits or expose 1 card.
Yeah. Yeah, it's not awesome.
Yeah, I almost ran this in my Comet deck, but I opted to go for instead those neutral cards that came out pretty late in the game that are 1 influence, where it's like one gives you 2 credits and draws you 1 card, and the other draws you 2 cards and gives you 1 credit.
Right, yeah.
I ended up slotting those instead.
Those are better.
Yes. Because exposing just isn't good for the reasons we already talked about.
Yep. Okay, so this did not affect the meta. Flavor?
I don't know why, but I always liked the flavor and the flavor text of this card. And I don't know why.
It's kind of simple, but it's not bad. I'm not overly fond of it, but I don't dislike it either. I'm kind of neutral on it.
I don't know why, but so the flavor text, I guess you read 2 back-to-back, so I'll read 2 back-to-back now. Is bring back any memories, Monica? John Animal McAvoy?
McAvoy, I think, is how you do that.
Well, it's an E, though.
McAvoy.
All right, weird. Anyway, I don't know why, but I've always thought that flavor text was so... I thought it was cool just because of how, what's the word for it? Where something's not clear, I guess. It's like open-ended, what the hell do you call it?
Yeah. I guess I just don't see what it has to do with the card.
I guess I don't either, but I don't know. I just, for some reason, I always thought that was just a cool quote from our boy John here, who I'm assuming is the man with the cigar on the card.
Well, now you're just assuming genders.
Yeah, tend to do that sometimes in the cyber future. But yeah, I always kind of liked it, but I will admit that it's not like amazingly strong or anything as far as in the flavor and art department.
This is bland, is my opinion. Like, it's not bad, but I'm eating plain toast. This is just okay.
It's just okay. And that's okay. Rating?
1 star.
Yeah, I also am going to give it 1 star.
Yeah, it's not really meat space garbage, but it's uninspired and not very good.
It's just whatever,
Mm-hmm. I will forget about it again soon after I stop talking about it.
As soon as this episode is over, I will have forgotten Infiltration exists.
Indeed.
And honestly, that's as it should be. And then when I show this card to you in the next episode, I'm going to say, bring back any memories, Isaac?
Well, at least that will be a decent bit.
Yep. And that's the bit that we're going to end the episode on.